Imagine this. It's your first day at a high-stakes job. You're already late, soaking wet from the rain, and desperate to find HR. You shove open a door marked Staff, only to walk straight into a wall of steam. And there, standing under a rainfall shower with absolutely nothing to hide, is the most dangerous, devastatingly handsome man you've ever seen. He's built like a tank, scarred like a warrior, and he is not happy you're there. But instead of letting you leave, he slams the door shut, blocks your path with his massive frame, and drops his voice to a low, predatory rumble. Enjoying the view? This isn't just a meet cute, it's a meet danger. And Cleo Halloway is about to make the mistake of a lifetime. She's going to talk back to the alpha. 2. The welcome. Welcome back to the pack, and a huge hello to our new listeners. You are tuned into Linas Romantasy Collection, the home of the best werewolf and paranormal romance stories on YouTube. If you love possessive alphas and feisty heroines, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. It helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss a chapter. I love seeing how far our pack extends across the globe. Drop a flag or tell me where you are listening from down in the comments section right now. Now, let's step into the steam. Chapter 1. The Wrong Door. The 1990 Ford Bronco died with a sound like a hacking cough and a final, shuddering death rattle. Cleo Halloway rested her forehead against the steering wheel, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and old upholstery. "You are a traitor," she whispered to the dashboard. "I just put new spark plugs in you. Ungrateful bucket of bolts." The Bronco didn't answer. It just sat there, steam curling lazily from the hood, parked diagonally across two spaces in the glistening, rain-slicked parking lot of IronClad Wellness. Cleo checked her watch. 7:58 a.m. She was supposed to be shaking hands with the facility director at 8 a.m. sharp. "Okay, fine. Be that way." She grabbed her heavy canvas duffel bag from the passenger seat. It clinked, glass bottles of therapeutic oils, her custom deep tissue tools, and her spare change of clothes. She shoved the door open with her shoulder. The Portland rain greeted her instantly, a fine, freezing mist that wasn't quite a downpour, but soaked you to the bone in seconds. She slammed the truck door, locked it manually, and sprinted toward the massive brick building that loomed ahead. IronClad Wellness didn't look like a gym, it looked like a fortress. It was an industrial renovation project in the Pearl District, red brick, black steel beams, and windows tinted so dark they looked like polished onyx. It was exclusive, expensive, and apparently her new employer. She reached the main glass double doors. Locked. She tugged again. Nothing. A small keypad blinked red at her. "Come on," she hissed, wiping rain from her eyelashes. She fished the crumpled email out of her pocket. "Use the staff entrance around the east wing during renovations." Cleo jogged around the corner of the building, her boots splashing in puddles. The east wing was a mess of scaffolding and yellow caution tape. There was a heavy steel door propped open with a cinder block, labeled with a handwritten sign, "Staff, Delivery." Finally! She ducked under the scaffolding and slipped inside. The noise of the city rain vanished instantly, replaced by the hum of high-end HVAC systems and the faint, expensive smell of cedarwood and eucalyptus. She was in a hallway, a long, dimly lit corridor with plush runners on the floor. It didn't look like a staff hallway. It looked like the entrance to a villain's lair in a spy movie or a very expensive spa. "Hello?" Her voice echoed slightly. "I'm looking for HR." No answer, just the distant sound of running water. She checked her watch again. 8:05 a.m. Great. Late on day one. Her new boss, a man named Declan Rourke, was rumored to be formidable. The reviews online were scarce, but the word in the physio community was that he was demanding, precise, and intolerant of error. She hurried down the hall, following the sound of voices, or what she thought were voices. She saw a set of double doors at the end of the corridor. A brass plaque read, "Executive Recovery." Recovery? That meant therapy rooms. That meant her department. "Okay, Cleo, shoulders back. Don't look like a drowned rat." She shook out her damp hair, wiped her boots on the mat, and pushed the doors open with a confident shove. She didn't walk into an office. She walked into a wall of steam. It was a locker room, but calling it a locker room was like calling the Taj Mahal a house. The floors were heated slate, the lockers were mahogany, and in the center of the room, standing under the spray of an open rainfall shower that wasn't blocked by a curtain or a door, was a man. Cleo froze. The heavy door swung shut behind her with a definitive click, sealing her inside. The man turned. He was massive. That was the first scientific observation her brain supplied. He wasn't just gym fit, he was built like something engineered to survive a collision. Water cascaded down a back that was a topography of shifting muscle, running over wide shoulders, tapering down a spine that sat in a deep groove. He wrapped a towel around his waist with a speed that blurred, whipping around to face her. Cleo's breath hitched. Not from attraction, though he was unfairly attractive, but from the sheer intensity of his glare. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead, and eyes the color of aged whiskey, glowing with irritation. He blocked her path to the exit, looming over her. He had to be at least 6'5". The steam swirled around him, making him look like a myth emerging from the mist. "This is a private area." His voice was a low rumble, a baritone that she felt in the soles of her boots. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. Cleo clutched her duffel bag to her chest. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but she refused to cringe. She wasn't a trespasser, she was an employee. She straightened her spine, looking him dead in the eye. "The sign outside said staff entrance. I'm staff. Or I will be if I can find the orientation meeting instead of the shower." The man blinked, the water dripping from his nose. He seemed surprised she hadn't fled. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The heat radiating off him was palpable, like standing next to a furnace. "Enjoying the view?" he asked, his voice dry, sharp with sarcasm. Cleo felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she tamped it down. "I'm a physiotherapist. I'm looking at your anterior pelvic tilt, not your view. You're standing aggressively. It's bad for your lumbar spine." Chapter 2. The Interview. The silence that followed was heavy enough to weigh on the scale. Declan Rourke stared at her. Most people, when faced with him in this state, half-naked, wet, and radiating the kind of dominant energy that usually made lesser men step back, would apologize and retreat. This woman, wet, frizzy-haired, and barely reaching his chin, was critiquing his posture. He didn't laugh. Instead, a slow, predatory amusement curled the corner of his mouth. He crossed his arms over his chest, the muscles bunching with the movement. "My spine is fine," Declan said, his tone dismissing her assessment. "You must be Miss Halloway. You're late." "Technical difficulties," Cleo said, her grip on her bag tightening. "My truck has personality issues, and your signage is misleading." "My signage keeps people out of places they don't belong," Declan countered. He turned his back to her, a deliberate display of indifference, and walked toward the bench to grab a t-shirt. "Wait in the office. Glass door to your left. Don't touch anything." Cleo bristled at the command, but bit her tongue. "Yes, Mr. Rourke." She marched out of the steam-filled room and into the adjoining office. It was sleek, sterile, and intimidatingly expensive. She stood by the door, refusing to sit until invited. Declan entered a moment later, fully clothed in a charcoal suit that fit him with bespoke precision. The transformation from dripping wet savage to corporate executive was jarring. He walked behind his massive oak desk and sat down, gesturing for her to take the chair opposite him. He didn't smile. He opened a file folder, her resume. "You have impressive credentials," Declan said, not looking up. "Top of your class, specialization in sports trauma, but you've bounced between 3 clinics in 2 years. Why?" "I have high standards," Cleo said evenly. "I believe in treating the injury, not just churning through insurance claims. Most clinics want volume. I want results." Declan looked up then. His amber eyes locked onto hers, dissecting her. "We don't do insurance here. We do results. My clients are unique. They require discretion and absolute competence. He slid a contract across the desk. This is an NDA. It's ironclad, pun intended. You discuss nothing that happens inside these walls. Not the clients, not their injuries, and certainly not their recovery speeds. Can you handle that? Cleo picked up the pen. I'm a vault, Mr. Rourke, as long as the check's clear and the equipment is up to code. The equipment is state-of-the-art, Declan said, and the check's always clear. She signed. He watched her hand move, his gaze intense. One more thing, Declan said as she capped the pen. I run a tight ship. I don't tolerate drama, and I don't tolerate lateness. If your truck has personality issues, fix it. Or get a new truck. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. Cleo met his gaze, her chin lifting slightly. I'll keep a wrench in the glove box. Anything else? Declan leaned back, the leather chair creaking under his weight. You start now. Patient in room B. Name is Caleb. Don't let him charm you, he talks too much. He slid a business card across the desk, black matte, gold text, just a number. My private line. For emergencies only. And by emergencies, I mean blood or fire, not payroll questions. I'm here to fix shoulders, not make friends, Cleo said, pocketing the card. Good, Declan murmured, turning his attention back to his computer. Close the door on your way out. Cleo walked out, her heart thumping. He was arrogant, demanding, and terrifyingly competent. And she had the distinct feeling that working for him was going to be the most exhausting thing she'd ever done. Chapter 3. The First Patient. Treatment Room B was immaculate. Cleo washed her hands, taking a moment to center herself. He's just a boss, she told herself. A very large, very intense boss. She turned to face her patient. Caleb was sitting on the edge of the treatment table. He was young, maybe early 20s, with sandy blonde hair and a nervous, bouncing energy. He was clutching his right arm against his chest. Hi, Cleo said, snapping on a pair of nitrile gloves. I'm Cleo. I hear you have a shoulder problem. Hey, I'm Caleb, he chirped, wincing as he shifted. Yeah, shoulder problem, big time. I, tripped. Hiking. Fell on a rock. Cleo walked over. Shirt off, please. Caleb struggled out of his t-shirt. Cleo hissed in sympathy. His shoulder was a disaster. It was dislocated anteriorly, but the bruising was horrific, deep purple and black mottling that extended down his bicep. There were scrapes that looked like he'd been dragged across gravel at high speed. This is some rock, Cleo commented dryly. She placed her hands on his skin. She pulled back slightly. You're burning up. I run hot, Caleb said quickly, his eyes widening. Metabolic thing. My doctor knows about it. It's fine. Cleo frowned. It felt like he had a fever of 103, but his skin wasn't clammy. It was dry and emanating heat like a radiator. And the muscle density, it was hard. Not just tight, but dense, like trying to massage a tree trunk. Okay, Cleo said, trusting her hands even if the logic was weird. I need to reduce this. It's going to hurt. I can take it, Caleb said, gripping the edge of the table. Just do it fast. Mr. Rourke is going to kill me if I'm not back on security detail by tonight. Mr. Rourke isn't going to kill anyone, Cleo said, positioning his arm. And you are not working tonight. You're resting. Tell him I said so. Caleb laughed nervously. You tell him. I like my head attached to my body. Cleo rolled her eyes. Relax your trap. Breathe in. Crack! She maneuvered the joint back into place. Caleb let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that vibrated in his chest. It didn't sound like a scream. It sounded like an animal warning. Cleo paused, staring at him. Sorry, Caleb gasped, shaking his head. Sorry, hurts. It's okay, Cleo said, grabbing an ice pack. She began to strap the shoulder. You have a high pain tolerance. Most guys would be crying for their mothers. We're built differently here, Caleb muttered. wiping sweat from his forehead. As Cleo finished the taping, her phone buzzed on the counter. A loud, screeching notification filled the quiet room. Squawk! Intruder! Intruder! Caleb jumped. What is that? Cleo grabbed the phone, flushing. It's my home security system, or rather, my parrot. She checked the camera feed. Pickles was hanging upside down from his cage, screaming at an innocent jogger through the front window. You have a parrot? Caleb grinned. That's cool. He's a menace, Cleo corrected. He has a vocabulary of insults that would make a sailor blush. Sounds like he'd fit in here, Caleb laughed. He hopped off the table, testing his arm. Thanks, Cleo. Seriously, it feels way better. Don't move it, Cleo ordered, pointing a finger at him. Ice, rest. I want to see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. This is a 6-week recovery, Caleb, minimum. If I see you lifting anything heavier than a remote control, I will tell Rourke. Caleb paled. 6 weeks? He'll bench me forever. Understood. See you tomorrow. He bolted out of the room. Cleo watched him go, peeling off her gloves. Built different, he had said. She looked at her hands. They were still tingling from the heat of his skin. What kind of gym is this? Chapter 4. The Coffee Incident. The next morning, Cleo was early. She wasn't going to give Declan Rourke any ammunition to criticize her punctuality. She was in her office, organizing patient files, when the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. She looked up. Declan was standing in the doorway. He held 2 coffee cups. He walked in without asking, placing one on her desk. Black, 2 sugars, dash of cinnamon, he said. Cleo stared at the cup. Have you been reading my diary? Or do you just have a disturbing amount of information on your employees? I notice things, Declan said smoothly. He didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of her desk, crossing his ankles. It was a power pose, relaxed, claiming the space. It's part of the job. Cleo took a sip. It was perfect. She hated that it was perfect. Thank you, she said, keeping her tone professional. To what do I owe the service? Did I break a rule I didn't know about? Just checking on my investment, Declan said. He took a sip of his own coffee, his eyes scanning her office. They landed on the photo frame on her desk, a picture of her and Pickles. The parrot, Declan said. Caleb mentioned him. Caleb talks too much, Cleo murmured. Is he loud? Declan asked. There was a weird nuance to the question, like he was checking for noise pollution. He has his moments, Cleo said. Why? Is there a no-bird clause in the NDA? No, Declan said. He looked back at her. I'm just curious about the things that occupy my staff's time outside of work. Distractions can be dangerous. My personal life is my own, Mr. Rourke, Cleo said, meeting his gaze evenly. Pickles is high maintenance, but he's not a distraction. He's family. Declan studied her for a long moment. He seemed to be weighing her defiance. Then he nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Family is important, he agreed. His voice softened, losing its corporate edge for a second. Keep him safe. He has a beak like a bolt cutter, Cleo said. He keeps himself safe. I'm sure he does. Declan straightened up. The moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced by the alpha mask. Check Caleb again. Report directly to me. Yes, sir, Cleo said, a hint of sarcasm on the honorific. Declan paused at the door. And Halloway? Yes? The cinnamon suits you. A little bit of spice. He walked out before she could respond. Cleo stared at the empty doorway, her heart doing a ridiculous little flip. Don't fall for it, she whispered to herself. He's just charming you so you work harder. Chapter 5. The Rapid Healing. At 10 a.m., Caleb walked in. He wasn't wearing a sling. He was swinging his arms as he walked. Morning, Cleo! Cleo dropped her pen. Caleb, what did I say about immobilization? It's fine. Look! Caleb rotated his arm in a full windmill. Good as new. Cleo stood up slowly. Sit. Now. Caleb sat, looking like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Cleo marched over and pulled the collar of his shirt down to inspect the shoulder. She gasped. The bruising, the horrific, deep tissue trauma from yesterday, was gone. The skin was flawless. The joint was stable. Even the scrapes were healed, leaving only faint, silvery lines that looked months old. This, Cleo stepped back, her mind reeling. This is impossible. I told you, Caleb said, grinning nervously. Fast healer, good genes. My grandma was practically Wolverine, Cleo finished for him. Yeah, I heard. She grabbed his chart. Grade 3 dislocation, severe hematoma. Caleb, she said, her voice low and dangerous. What are you taking? Is it HGH? Steroids? Some experimental peptide cocktail Rourke is importing? No! Caleb looked genuinely offended. We're clean, I swear. Just protein shakes and rest. Liar, Cleo hissed. Get out! But, go. I need to talk to your boss. Caleb scrambled out of the room. Cleo grabbed the file and marched down the hallway. She was furious. She was a medical professional, and she was being played. If this was a doping ring, she was legally liable. She stormed into Declan's office. He was on a call, standing by the window. He turned as she entered, saw her face, and hung up the phone without a word. You have 30 seconds to explain why Caleb's shoulder healed a 6-week injury in 12 hours, Cleo said, slamming the file on his desk. Declan didn't flinch. He walked over to the desk, calm and imposing. He responded well to treatment. You're a good therapist. Don't patronize me, Cleo snapped. That wasn't therapy. That was biology voodoo. Or it was drugs. Are you doping these kids, Rourke? Because if you are, I'm out. I won't lose my license for your results. Declan's face hardened. He leaned over the desk, placing his hands flat on the wood. He didn't yell, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I do not drug my people, he stated, his voice cold and absolute. We have genetic advantages, unique physiology. That is what you signed the NDA for. That is why you are paid double the market rate. Genetic advantages don't knit capillaries overnight, Cleo argued, though she felt the weight of his presence pressing down on her. They do here, Declan said. He held her gaze, his amber eyes burning with a command that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to hold it. You're asking me to ignore medical science, Cleo said, her voice shaking slightly. I'm asking you to trust me, Declan corrected. He straightened up, crossing his arms. I hired you because you are smart, Cleo. Smart enough to know when to ask questions, and when to accept that the world is more complex than a textbook. He wasn't begging, he was drawing a line in the sand. Accept it or leave. Cleo looked at him. She saw the steel in his spine, but also a flicker of protectiveness. He wasn't hiding a crime, he was guarding a secret. I'm watching you, she said finally, stepping back. If I see one needle mark, one sign of addiction, I'm reporting this facility to the State Medical Board. Declan nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. Fair enough, but you won't find any. We'll see, Cleo muttered. She turned to leave. Cleo! Declan called out. She paused, hand on the doorknob. You're doing a good job, he said quietly. Caleb is lucky to have you. Caleb is a genetic freak, she shot back, but there was no venom in it. And so are you. She walked out, leaving the door open. Declan watched her go, letting out a long breath. She's too sharp, he whispered to the empty room. This is going to be a problem. Chapter 6. The Caloric Deficit. The following week at IronClad Wellness was a masterclass in tension. Cleo Halloway walked the halls like a woman navigating a minefield, her eyes sharp, scanning for evidence. She wasn't just a physiotherapist anymore. She was a forensic investigator in scrubs. Every time she entered the locker room, she checked the trash bins for vials or syringes. Every time she treated a patient, she checked their pupils for dilation. She found nothing. No needles, no shady transactions. What she did find was food. Wrappers. Everywhere. It was Tuesday afternoon, and Cleo was hunting for a stapler. She wandered into the staff break room, a space usually reserved for the VIP team, and stopped dead in the doorway. Declan Rourke was sitting at the small round table. In front of him was a spread that looked less like a lunch and more like a catering order for a rugby team. There were 3 whole rotisserie chickens, stripped nearly to the bone, a mountain of brown rice in a Tupperware container the size of a shoebox, and a protein shake that smelled aggressively of raw eggs and whey. He looked up, a chicken leg halfway to his mouth. He didn't look guilty or embarrassed. He just looked annoyed at the interruption. "Hungry?" Cleo asked, leaning against the doorframe, crossing her arms. Declan set the chicken leg down with slow, deliberate dignity. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, his movements precise. "I have a high metabolic rate, Cleo. We've discussed this." "High metabolic rate?" Cleo walked over and picked up an empty wrapper. "Declan, this is easily 6,000 calories. You just ate a family's weekly grocery run in one sitting. Unless you're training to fight a grizzly bear, this is medically concerning." "Maybe I am," he muttered, his voice low and vibrating with a dark humor she couldn't quite parse. "Is that a metaphor for corporate takeovers?" "No," he said, standing up. He towered over her, the sudden movement displacing the air in the small room. He gathered the pile of bones with efficiency. "It's just a Tuesday." Cleo watched him dump the debris into the trash. The movement of his back muscles under his fitted dress shirt was hypnotic, a ripple of power that seemed too dense, too heavy for a normal human. It was like watching a panther stretch, beautiful but inherently dangerous. "You know," Cleo said, testing the waters, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "insatiable hunger is a common side effect of certain performance enhancers, just like the rapid healing and the density." Declan paused. He turned slowly, trapping her with those amber eyes. "Are we back to the steroids theory?" "I go where the evidence leads," Cleo said, standing her ground, though her heart kicked a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "You eat like a furnace, Rourke. Furnaces need fuel. What are you burning?" He stepped closer. He wasn't crowding her, he was gravitating toward her. The air between them hummed with that strange static charge she had started to associate with him. "I burn everything," he said softly, his gaze dropping to her mouth for a fraction of a second before snapping back up to her eyes. "Stop looking for needles, Cleo. You won't find them. I'm clean." "Then explain the biology," she challenged, though her voice lacked its usual bite. Being this close to him made her brain misfire. "I can't," he said, walking past her to the door. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder. "Not yet, just keep fixing us, and stop counting my calories. It's rude." He left her alone in the break room, surrounded by the smell of rotisserie chicken and the lingering, confusing scent of cedar and rain. Chapter 7. The Intruder. By Thursday, the feeling of being watched had followed Cleo home. She lived in a craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood that realtors called up and coming, which was code for historic charm, but don't leave your bike on the porch. It was 9 p.m. The Portland rain was hammering against the roof, a relentless rhythm that usually helped her sleep. But tonight, Pickles was agitated. The African gray was pacing his perch, his feathers puffed out until he looked like a stormy gray cloud. "Bad dog! Bad dog!" the parrot squawked, bobbing his head aggressively at the window. "There's no dog, Pickles," Cleo sighed, looking up from her medical journal. "It's just the wind. Eat your walnuts." Thump. A heavy sound. Outside, near the back fence. Cleo froze. That wasn't wind. Wind didn't have mass. She set her journal down and crept toward the kitchen, grabbing her home defense system, a heavy cast-iron skillet she kept on the stove. She kept the lights off, moving through the shadows like a ghost in her own home. She peered through the blinds of the back window. The yard was a mess of rain and darkness, illuminated only by the faint, sickly glow of the neighbor's porch light. There, near the old oak tree, a shadow detached itself from the trunk. It was big, too big to be a person. It was low to the ground, moving with a fluid, predatory grace. It looked like a massive dog. A wolf? In the middle of the city? Cleo's breath fogged the glass. The creature turned its head. Two glowing eyes, reflective gold, stared directly at her window. It didn't look like a wild animal scavenging for trash. It looked like a sentry. It looked intelligent. "Okay," Cleo whispered, her grip on the skillet tightening until her knuckles turned white. That's it. She wasn't going to be the victim in a horror movie who waited for the monster to break in. She went to the back door and flipped the deadbolt. Then, she slammed her hand against the glass and yelled, "Hey, get out of here! I have a gun and a very angry parrot!" The shadow didn't flinch. It just stared. Then, with a dismissive chuff that sounded almost human, it turned and trotted away into the darkness, vanishing as if it had never been there. Cleo slumped against the door, her heart racing like a trapped bird. This wasn't normal. The weird boss, the healing kid, the massive wolf in her backyard. She grabbed her phone. She hesitated, then texted the only person she knew who looked like he could wrestle a wolf and win. "Cleo, I think I have a stalker, or a wild animal problem. There was a massive wolf in my yard." The reply came 3 seconds later. "Declan, lock the doors. I'm coming over." Chapter 8. The Kitchen Sink. Declan arrived in 12 minutes. Considering he lived in a penthouse across town, he must have driven like he was escaping a bank robbery. He stood on her porch, soaked, wearing a black hoodie and gray sweatpants that clung to him. He didn't knock. He just stood there, radiating a protective, almost violent concern until she opened the door. "Where did it go?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He filled her small entryway completely, bringing the smell of the storm in with him. "It ran off," Cleo said, still holding the skillet. "It was huge, Declan. Like a husky on steroids. It was watching the house." Declan walked past her, checking the window locks with professional efficiency. "It won't come back," he said grimly. "I'll make sure of it." "How? Are you going to sternly lecture the wildlife?" Cleo asked, trying to mask her fear with sarcasm. "Something like that." He turned to face her, looking around the cozy, cluttered living room. His eyes landed on the birdcage. "So this is the roommate," Declan said, his tension easing slightly as he looked at the bird. Pickles, who had been watching silently, decided this was his moment. He hopped to the front of the cage, tilted his head, and screeched. "Big head! Big head! Squawk!" Cleo groaned, covering her face. "Pickles, be polite." Declan laughed. It was a warm, rumbling sound. "He's observant. I've been told I have a thick skull." He walked over to the cage. "Hello, Menace." "Men are trash," Pickles replied cheerfully. "Okay, that's enough," Cleo said, grabbing the cage cover. "He's overstimulated. And you're wet. Do you want a towel?" "I'm fine," Declan said. He turned back to her. "You look pale, Cleo. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Cleo lied. She walked into the kitchen to put the skillet away. "I was just startled, and now my adrenaline is crashing, and my kitchen sink is leaking again, and I'm having a really bad week." She gestured to the puddle forming under the cabinet. "The washer is busted. I tried to fix it earlier, but it's rusted shut." "Let me look," Declan said. He followed her into the kitchen. "You don't have to—" "Cleo." He stopped her, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I can't fix the wolf problem legally right now, but I can fix a sink. Let me be useful." He knelt down, opening the cabinet doors. He looked ridiculous, this massive, powerful alpha male squeezed under her tiny porcelain sink, surrounded by bottles of dish soap. "Pass me the wrench," he said, his voice echoing from the cabinet. Cleo handed it to him. She leaned against the counter, watching his legs. You know, for a tyrant, you're surprisingly domestic. I like things to work properly, he grunted. This pipe is rusted solid. Stand back. Be careful, Cleo warned. It's old piping. Don't force it. I got it. Just a little torque and… crack! It wasn't the sound of the pipe coming loose. It was the sound of metal shearing. Son of a… Declan hissed, recoil jerking his body. Chapter 9. The Glitch in Reality. Declan? Cleo pushed off the counter, alarm spiking. Declan scrambled backward, sliding out from under the cabinet. He was clutching his left hand. Blood, bright, red, and arterial, was already welling up between his fingers, dripping onto her linoleum floor with a steady drip, drip, drip. Damn it, he muttered. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. The metal snapped. Rusty threading. Cleo's medical training overrode her panic. Let me see. Pressure. Apply pressure. She grabbed a clean dish towel and wrapped it around his hand, pulling him toward the overhead light. Move your fingers. Can you feel them? If you severed a tendon, we need to go to the ER immediately. I'm fine, Declan said through gritted teeth, trying to pull his hand away. Cleo, stop. I don't need the ER. Don't be a macho idiot, Cleo snapped, holding his wrist with a grip of iron. You are bleeding all over my floor. Let me assess the damage. She peeled back the blood-soaked towel. It was bad. A deep, jagged laceration across the meat of his palm. She could see the white flash of subcutaneous tissue. It definitely needed stitches. Maybe microsurgery. Okay, she said, her voice shaking slightly, but her mind racing through protocols. I have a suture kit in my bag. I can stabilize it, but we have to… Cleo, wait, Declan said. His voice was strained, breathless. Don't look. What do you mean, don't look? I'm your doctor. She looked down to clean the wound. And then the world stopped. The bleeding had stopped. That was the first impossibility. A wound that deep doesn't just coagulate in 30 seconds. Then, the second impossibility happened. As she watched, the edges of the jagged wound began to tremble. Tiny, invisible threads seemed to pull the skin together. The raw, red flesh knitted itself shut, turning pink, then white, then vanishing. The skin smoothed over. The blood on his hand remained, a red smear of evidence, but the wound it came from was gone. Erased. Cleo dropped the towel. It hit the floor with a wet slap. She stared at his hand. Then she grabbed it, rubbing her thumb over his palm, smearing the blood away. Underneath, the skin was unblemished, calloused, warm, and whole. No, she whispered. The word fell out of her mouth like a stone. That's not biology. She looked up at his face. Declan wasn't looking at his hand. He was looking at her. His eyes were wide, pleading, and swirling with a gold light that definitely wasn't a reflection of the kitchen bulb. Cleo, he started, reaching for her with his other hand. Don't panic. Let me explain. The logic she had built her life on, anatomy, physiology, cause and effect, shattered like glass. This wasn't steroids. This wasn't a metabolic condition. What are you? She breathed, backing away until her hips hit the sharp edge of the counter. I'm still me, Declan said, taking a step forward. I'm Declan. You just grew your hand back! Cleo's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. Stay away from me! Chapter 10. The Reaction. Fear is a cold thing. It starts in the stomach and shoots to the extremities, numbing the fingers and sharpening the vision. Cleo looked at the man standing in her kitchen. He was covered in blood that shouldn't be outside his body anymore. He was massive. And he was something other. Cleo, listen to me, Declan said, raising both hands, one clean, one bloody and whole, in a surrender gesture. But he didn't look submissive. He looked like a predator trying very hard not to spook prey. I wanted to tell you. I was waiting for the right time. The right time? Cleo laughed, a brittle, terrified sound. What? Over coffee? By the way, I heal like a cartoon character. She grabbed the first thing her hand landed on, her car keys. They were sitting on the counter next to the fruit bowl. I'm not going to hurt you, he said, his voice dropping to that low rumble again. I would never hurt you. I protect what is mine. I am not yours, she yelled. I am an employee, and I quit. She feinted to the left, then bolted for the hallway. She expected him to grab her. He was faster than her, she knew that. He could have intercepted her before she took 2 steps, but he didn't move. He stood statue still in the kitchen, letting her run. She scrambled to the front door, fumbling with the lock. Her fingers were slippery with sweat and residual fear. She threw the door open and sprinted into the rain. The Bronco was parked in the driveway. Please start, she begged, jamming the key into the ignition. Please, please, please. She turned the key. The engine groaned. Chug, chug. Come on, she screamed, slamming her hand on the steering wheel. Declan appeared in the doorway of her house. He was silhouetted by the hall light. He just stood there, watching her. He didn't chase. He didn't roar. He just looked devastatingly sad. The Bronco roared to life with a cloud of black smoke. Cleo threw it into reverse, tires squealing on the wet pavement, and backed out of the driveway fast enough to clip her own mailbox. She shifted into drive and floored it, the heavy truck lurching forward. She didn't look back. She drove with white-knuckled desperation, putting as much distance as possible between herself and the man who could knit his skin back together. She drove for 40 minutes, aimlessly circling the city, checking her rearview mirror every 3 seconds. No one was following her. The rain lashed against the windshield, washing away the world she thought she knew. Finally, exhausted and shivering, she pulled into the blindingly bright parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket. It was the only place with enough people and cameras to make her feel safe. She killed the engine and locked the doors. She curled up in the driver's seat, hugging her knees to her chest. He's a werewolf, she whispered to the empty car. The word felt ridiculous in her mouth. My boss is a werewolf, and I just left my parrot with him. She groaned, dropping her head onto her knees. Pickles was probably teaching him swear words right now. I have to go back, she realized with a sinking dread. I can't leave Pickles with the wolf. But not tonight. Tonight, she was sleeping in the Bronco. Chapter 11. The Digital Stakeout. The parking lot of the 24-hour Super Save was a desolate landscape of wet asphalt and flickering halogen lights. It was 3 a.m. Cleo Halloway was curled into a ball in the driver's seat of her Bronco, wrapped in a blanket she kept in the back for emergencies. Her emergency kit contained jumper cables, a flashlight, and a granola bar from 2023. It did not contain a protocol for, "My boss is a mythological creature." She stared at her phone. The screen cast a ghostly blue light on her face. Her finger hovered over the app icon labeled Pickles Cam. Just check, she whispered, her breath fogging the air. See if he ate the bird. She tapped the icon. The screen buffered for a painfully long second, then the live feed from her living room popped up. The room was quiet. The cage was covered, which meant Declan had put Pickles to bed. Cleo swiped to the kitchen camera. Declan was there. He wasn't rampaging. He wasn't howling at the moon. He was on his hands and knees with a roll of paper towels and a bottle of her eco-friendly surface cleaner, scrubbing her linoleum floor. He was cleaning up his own blood. Cleo watched, mesmerized and confused. He moved with a terrifying grace, his massive frame making her kitchen look like a dollhouse. Once the floor was spotless, he stood up and leaned against the counter, staring at the back door where she had fled hours ago. He looked wrecked. His shoulders, usually squared with arrogant confidence, were slumped forward. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the dark strands. Then, he turned and looked directly at the camera. Cleo dropped the phone. She scrambled to pick it up, heart hammering. He knows. On the tiny screen, Declan didn't look angry. He looked resigned. He walked over to the fruit bowl, picked up an apple, and pulled a pocket knife from his pocket. He sliced a piece, walked into the living room, and slipped it through the bars of Pickle's cage. "She runs fast," she heard him mutter through the phone's tinny speaker. "Squawk! Men are trash!" came the muffled reply from under the cover. "Yeah," Declan agreed, his voice a low rumble. "Sometimes we are." He sat down on her thrift store sofa, clearly prepared to wait all night. Cleo stared at the screen. A monster didn't clean your floor. A monster didn't give your parrot a midnight snack. A monster didn't look at the door like he was hoping you'd come back so he could apologize. "He's not going to leave," she realized, "and I can't live in a supermarket parking lot." She looked at her keys. She was exhausted, cold, and her back was killing her. "If he eats me," she told the dashboard, "I'm going to give him such bad indigestion." She turned the key. The Bronco roared to life, sounding like a tank entering battle. She put it in gear and headed home. Chapter 12. The Porch Confession. Dawn was breaking when Cleo pulled into her driveway. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world gray and dripping. Declan was sitting on her front porch steps. He must have heard the truck coming from blocks away, but he didn't stand up. He kept his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. He had cleaned the blood off himself, but he was still wearing the same sweatpants and hoodie. Cleo turned off the engine. She sat in the car for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel. "Courage, Halloway." She opened the door and stepped out, keeping the distance between them. She didn't have a weapon this time. She figured if he wanted to kill her, a skillet wouldn't stop him anyway. "You came back," Declan said. He didn't look up. His voice was rough, like gravel tumbling in a mixer. "I live here," Cleo said, leaning against the hood of her truck. "And you have my bird." Declan finally looked at her. His eyes were amber, piercing even in the dim morning light. "I fed him. He likes Honeycrisp apples." "Expensive taste," she muttered, "like his owner." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't the comfortable silence of two colleagues. It was the heavy, charged silence of a predator and wary prey negotiating a truce. "Say it," Cleo demanded. "Say what you are. No metaphors, no medical jargon." Declan stood up slowly, telegraphing his movements so she wouldn't flinch. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "I am a shifter," he said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a confession. "My pack calls us lichens. The world calls us werewolves. I am the alpha of the Cascade Ridge Pack." Cleo exhaled, a long plume of white mist. "So, the rapid healing, the body temperature, the density, it's all—" "Biology," he finished. "Not magic, just biology you haven't studied yet." "And the wolf in my yard?" "A sentry, keeping watch. I told him to leave." Cleo crossed her arms. "And you? Are you dangerous?" Declan took a step forward, then stopped when he saw her shoulders tense. "I am a predator, Cleo. I won't lie to you. Violence is part of my nature." He held her gaze, refusing to soften the truth. "But I don't hunt my own. And you?" He gestured vaguely to the space between them. "You are part of the pack now. You work for me. That means you are under my protection. I would tear the throat out of anything that tried to hurt you." "Including yourself?" she asked sharply. Declan's lips quirked in a dry, humorless smile. "Especially myself." Cleo looked at him. She saw the monster he claimed to be, but she also saw the man who fixed her sink and fed her parrot. She was terrified, yes, but she was also undeniably drawn to the sheer, raw honesty of him. "I need this job," she said, her voice steady. "I have debt. My truck is dying. I can't afford to quit because my boss has fur." "Then don't quit," he said immediately. "Stay. I'll double your salary. Hazard pay." "Triple," she countered. Declan blinked. Then he laughed, a genuine relieved sound. "Done." "And rules," she added, pointing a finger at him. "No wolf stuff while I'm working. No growling, no biting. And if you ever bleed on my floor again, you buy me new linoleum." "Understood," Declan said, bowing his head slightly in a gesture of mock submission that didn't hide his dominance at all. "Welcome back, Luna. Miss Halloway." "Don't push it, Rourke," she warned, walking past him up the stairs. "Now go home. You smell like wet dog." Chapter 13. Workplace Hazards. Returning to IronClad Wellness 2 days later felt like walking onto a different planet. The building looked the same: exposed brick, expensive steel, dark windows. But the context had shifted entirely. Cleo wasn't walking into a gym anymore, she was walking into a den. Every person she passed, the receptionist, the trainers, the clients lifting impossibly heavy weights, she analyzed them. Wolf? Wolf? Human? Definitely wolf. She made it to her office and shut the door, leaning against it. "Okay, just do the job. Treat the muscles. Ignore the claws." A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she squeaked, then cleared her throat. "Come in." Declan entered. He was back in his corporate armor, a navy suit, crisp white shirt, silk tie. He looked every inch the CEO, except Cleo now knew that underneath the Italian wool was a beast that could snap a femur like a twig. "How are you settling in?" he asked, standing by the door. He seemed to be making a conscious effort not to invade her space. "Fine," Cleo said, moving behind her desk to put a barrier between them. "Though I suspect my patient list is entirely made up of mythical creatures." "Mostly," Declan admitted, "but they have rotator cuffs just like everyone else. Speaking of which..." He rolled his shoulder, wincing slightly. "I tweaked something. Sparring." "Sparring?" Cleo raised an eyebrow. "With what? A bus?" "Another alpha," he said dismissively. "Can you look at it?" Cleo hesitated. This was the test. Could she touch him? Physically put her hands on the monster, without panicking? "Sit," she ordered, pointing to the treatment chair. Declan sat. He took off his jacket and unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the expanse of his chest and shoulders. Cleo approached him. She could feel the heat radiating off him from a foot away. She took a breath and placed her hands on his trapezius. He was hard as rock. His skin was fever hot, but as soon as she touched him, a low, subsonic vibration started in his chest. It traveled up through her fingers and into her arms. She snatched her hands back. "Are you purring?" Declan looked over his shoulder, looking genuinely offended. "Wolves do not purr, Cleo. It's a rumble of contentment. It means you have good hands." "It means you're vibrating," she corrected, stepping back in. She dug her thumbs into a knot at the base of his neck. "Relax, you're tense." "I'm always tense around you," he murmured. Cleo paused. "Is that a threat?" "No," he said, turning his head so he could look at her sideways. His eyes were half-lidded, heavy with an intensity that made her knees weak. "It's an observation. You smell like vanilla and fear. It's a distracting combination." "I can switch to a garlic shampoo if that helps," she quipped, pushing hard on a trigger point to punish him. Declan hissed, but he leaned into the pain. "Don't change a thing, just don't run again." "I'm not running," Cleo said, her voice soft. She traced the line of his spine. "I'm working. Now be quiet, Rourke. I'm trying to fix you." Chapter 14. The She-Wolf. By Friday, Cleo was feeling almost confident. Then she met Sienna. Cleo was in the main gym, supervising Caleb's rehabilitation exercises, when the double doors swung open. A woman walked in who made the supermodels in magazines look like amateurs. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with platinum blonde hair, legs that went on for days, and an imperious stride that screamed ownership. She was wearing workout gear that cost more than Cleo's entire wardrobe. She walked straight up to Caleb, ignoring Cleo entirely. "Caleb," the woman purred. "You look pathetic. Is the shoulder still bothering you?" "Hi, Sienna," Caleb mumbled, looking terrified. I'm recovering." Sienna turned her gaze to Cleo. Her eyes were icy blue and filled with a dismissal so absolute it felt like a physical slap. She sniffed the air, her lip curling slightly. "And this is the help?" Sienna asked. "Why does the gym smell like human?" Cleo straightened up. She held a clipboard against her chest. "I'm the head physiotherapist, and the gym smells like human because I haven't marked the territory yet. You must be Sienna. I assume your glutes are uneven from carrying all that attitude?" Caleb choked on a laugh, turning it into a cough. Sienna's eyes narrowed into slits. She took a step toward Cleo, looming over her. "Watch your tongue, little human. You are a guest in our house. Do not forget your place." "My place," Cleo said, stepping into Sienna's space rather than backing away, "is ensuring the athletes here don't injure themselves due to poor form. And yours is atrocious. Your lumbar curve is excessive. You're going to slip a disc if you keep posturing like that." Sienna growled, a low, audible sound. "I could snap you in half. And then you'd have to explain to Declan why you broke his triple-salaried employee," Cleo shot back. "I'm expensive to replace." "Is there a problem here?" Declan's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. He was standing on the mezzanine level, looking down at them. His hands were gripping the railing, the metal groaning under the pressure. Sienna's demeanor changed instantly. She smiled, looking up at him. "Declan, I was just introducing myself to the pet." "She has a name," Declan said. He vaulted over the railing, a 20-foot drop, and landed silently between the two women. He didn't look at Sienna. He looked at Cleo. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Cleo said, brushing imaginary dust off her scrubs. "Just giving some posture advice. Sienna seems to have a problem with her balance." Declan looked at Sienna. His eyes were cold. "Cleo is the pack healer. You will treat her with the same respect you treat me. Is that understood?" Sienna flinched. "She is human, Declan. She is weak." "She fixed Caleb when I couldn't," Declan growled. "She is not weak. Leave!" Sienna glared at Cleo one last time, then turned and stalked out. "Charming woman," Cleo noted once she was gone. "Ex-girlfriend?" "Political headache," Declan corrected. "She wanted to be Luna. She thought the position was vacant." "Is it?" Cleo asked, boldly. Declan looked down at her, his gaze burning. "It was, until recently." Chapter 15. The Gym Rat. Late that evening, Cleo stayed behind to use the facilities. One of the perks of the job was access to the gym, and she needed to burn off the stress of the week. The gym was mostly empty, save for a few maintenance staff and one lingering client, a wealthy tech bro named Brad, who had bought a membership just to stare at the female trainers. Cleo was on the treadmill, headphones in, zoning out. She didn't notice Brad approaching until he tapped her on the shoulder. She jumped, pulling an earbud out. "Can I help you?" Brad was a classic gym rat. Too much cologne, tight shirt, wandering eyes. "Just wanted to say, I've never seen you here before. You working off a few pounds?" Cleo blinked. "Excuse me?" "You look good," Brad said, leaning his hand on the treadmill console, trapping her. "Thick in the right places. You should let me spot you on the squats. I'm great with form." "I'm fine, thanks," Cleo said, reaching for her water bottle. "And I'm actually the physiotherapist here, so I know my form better than you do." "Feisty," Brad grinned, stepping closer. "I like that. Come on, one drink. I know the owner. I can get us into the VIP lounge." "I doubt that," Cleo said, her patience snapping. "Move, Brad. You're in my personal space." "Don't be a bitch," Brad sneered, reaching for her arm. The air in the gym suddenly grew heavy. The lights flickered. A sound, low, deep, and terrifying, vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't loud, but it was felt in the teeth and the bones. A subsonic growl. Brad froze. "What was that?" Declan emerged from the shadows of the weight room. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in a tank top, sweat glistening on his arms, and he looked absolutely murderous. He didn't yell. He walked toward them with a slow, stalking gait. His eyes were glowing gold. "Is there a problem, Brad?" Declan asked. His voice was soft, but it carried the promise of extreme violence. Brad turned pale. He looked from Declan to Cleo, finally realizing the dynamic. No, sir, just saying hi. You're done, Declan said. Leave, now. My membership. Revoked. Get out. The growl returned, louder this time. Brad scrambled backward, tripped over a bench, and practically ran for the exit. Cleo stood on the treadmill, watching the door swing shut. She looked at Declan. His chest was heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. He was fighting the wolf, holding it back by a thread. Are you okay? He asked, not looking at her. I had it handled, Cleo said, though her voice was breathless. But, thanks. Declan finally looked at her. The gold faded from his eyes, replaced by the warm whiskey brown. No one touches you, Cleo. No one. Cleo stepped off the treadmill. She walked up to him and poked him in the chest. Good dog. Declan let out a startled laugh, the tension breaking instantly. He shook his head, looking at her with a mix of exasperation and adoration. You are going to be the death of me, Halloway. Only if you don't fix your posture, she smirked, grabbing her towel. See you Monday, boss. Chapter 16. The Business Dinner. It is strictly a performance review, Declan said, leaning against the doorframe of Cleo's office. He looked obscenely good in a charcoal suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, accommodating the sheer width of his shoulders without straining. Cleo looked up from her laptop, raising a skeptical eyebrow. A performance review? At 8 p.m.? At Legree? Declan, that restaurant has a 6-month waiting list and serves foam as an appetizer. I know the owner, Declan said, checking his watch. He owes me a favor, a very large structural favor. Be ready in an hour. I'll pick you up. I have a truck, Cleo countered, and I don't need a ride to a performance review. It's raining, Declan stated, as if the weather obeyed his command. And your Bronco has a leak in the passenger side door seal. I can smell the mildew from here. Cleo opened her mouth to argue, then shut it. He was right. The Bronco smelled like a wet dog, which was ironic considering who she was talking to. Fine, she relented. But if this is a date, Rourke, you have to actually ask me. You don't summon me like a pack member. Declan paused. He stepped into the room, closing the distance between them. The air pressure dropped, that familiar heaviness that signaled his full attention was on her. Cleo, he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly murmur, would you do me the honor of accompanying me to dinner? I promise not to growl at the waiter. Cleo fought a smile. I'll consider it. Pick me up at 8. An hour later, Cleo was standing in front of her mirror, smoothing down a forest green wrap dress that she usually saved for weddings. It was modest, but hugged her curves in a way that made her feel powerful. She traded her Doc Martens for heeled boots. When Declan's black SUV pulled up, silent, sleek, and looking like it belonged in a presidential motorcade, she grabbed her coat. The dinner was unexpected. Cleo expected arrogance. She expected him to order for her. Instead, Declan asked her questions. Real questions. He wanted to know about her childhood in Ohio, why she chose physiotherapy, and why she tolerated a parrot that insulted her daily. Pickles is my reality check, Cleo explained, swirling her wine. It's hard to get a big head when a bird is screaming, "Clean the cage!" at you every morning. He reminds me that I'm just a servant to a higher power. Declan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I understand the feeling. The pack is demanding. They look to me for everything. Safety, direction, permission. It must be lonely, Cleo observed quietly, being the one everyone leans on. Declan stopped cutting his steak. He looked at her, his amber eyes softening. It was, he admitted, until recently. The admission hung in the air, heavy and sweet. Cleo felt a flush rise up her neck. For the first time, she wasn't looking at a werewolf or a boss. She was looking at a man who was tired of being strong alone. Chapter 17. The Slip. The drive back to Cleo's bungalow was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. The rain slashed against the windows, sealing them into a private, leather-upholstered world. When he pulled into her driveway, Cleo hesitated. The smart thing to do, the professional thing, was to thank him and go inside alone. But the way he had looked at her in the restaurant, like she was the only source of light in the room, made her brave. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. "I have coffee, or whiskey, depending on how the performance review went." "You passed," Declan murmured, killing the engine. "With flying colors." They walked up the porch steps. Cleo pulled the keyring from her pocket, but her hands were shaking too badly to find the house key. Declan reached over, his large hand covering hers to steady them. His skin was hot, a stark contrast to the cold night air. He took the keys and unlocked the door with a fluid, easy movement. They stepped inside. The house was warm and smelled of vanilla candles. Declan didn't move away. He stood close, crowding her against the closed door. He wasn't touching her, not yet, but the heat of his body was encompassing. "Cleo," he whispered. He reached out, his fingers grazing her jawline. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to her toes. "Declan," she breathed, looking up at him. He leaned down. His eyes were dark, his pupils blown wide. He smelled of rain, cedar, and that intoxicating masculine scent that was uniquely him. "I have been trying to be professional," he groaned, his forehead resting against hers. "But you make it very difficult." "Then stop trying," Cleo whispered. He closed the gap. His lips brushed hers, a tentative, testing pressure. Then, a low rumble started in his chest. A purr. It vibrated against her, primal and possessive. Cleo gasped, opening to him. His hands slid down to her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry, a collision of need that had been building for weeks. Squawk! A piercing whistle cut through the air, followed by the sound of a bell ringing frantically. "Stranger danger! Hide the walnuts! Call the cops!" Declan froze. He pulled back, breathing hard, his lips swollen. He looked over Cleo's shoulder toward the living room. Pickles was hanging upside down from the top of his cage, ringing his bell with maniacal enthusiasm. "Bad dog!" Pickles shrieked. "No kissing! Get a room!" Declan dropped his forehead onto Cleo's shoulder, his body shaking. For a second she thought he was crying. Then she realized he was laughing. "Every time," he choked out. "Every single time." Cleo buried her face in her hands, mortified but laughing too. "I am going to turn him into a feather duster." Declan kissed her temple, lingering there. "Rain check," he whispered against her skin. "Before I eat your roommate." Chapter 18. The Warning. The next morning at IronClad Wellness, the atmosphere was brittle. It wasn't just the awkwardness of the almost kiss, it was the air itself. The barometric pressure had plummeted overnight. The sky outside the tinted windows was a bruised, sickly purple, heavy with clouds that looked like impending violence. The wolves were agitated. Cleo noticed it immediately. Caleb was pacing the lobby. The other staff members were snapping at each other. Even the usually stoic front desk clerk growled at the delivery guy. Cleo found Declan in his office. He wasn't sitting. He was standing by the window, staring at the skyline. He looked tense, his muscles coiled tight under his shirt. "What is going on?" Cleo asked, closing the door. "Everyone is twitchy. I almost got bit for asking a client to foam roll his IT band." "Storm," Declan said without turning. "A big one. We feel the pressure drop before it hits. It messes with the inner ear. Makes the wolf restless." He turned to face her. He looked tired. "You should go home, Cleo. The roads are going to get bad." "I have patients booked until 4, Cleo said, crossing her arms. "And I have a 4-wheel drive. I'm not afraid of a little rain." "It's not just rain," Declan warned. "It's a bomb cyclone. Wind gusts up to 80 miles per hour. Trees will come down. Power will go out. I don't want you on the road." I'll be fine, Cleo insisted. I'm not fragile, Declan. Stop trying to wrap me in bubble wrap just because we... She trailed off, blushing. Because we almost kissed? Declan finished, stepping closer. No, I want you safe because you are vital. To the facility. And to me. I'm staying, Cleo said stubbornly. If the power goes out, we have generators. And if people get hurt, you need a medic. Declan stared at her, assessing her resolve. He sighed, scrubbing a hand over his face. Fine, but you stay in the executive wing. The walls are reinforced. If the glass in the main gym shatters, I don't want you near it. Deal, Cleo agreed. 2 hours later, the sky opened up. It wasn't rain, it was a deluge. The wind slammed into the building with a force that made the steel beams groan. Chapter 19. The Storm Breaks. By 3 p.m., Portland was underwater. The lights at IronClad flickered and died. The hum of the HVAC system cut out, replaced by an eerie silence that was instantly filled by the roar of the wind outside. A few seconds later, the emergency generators kicked on with a mechanical cough, bathing the hallways in dim, amber safety lighting. Cleo was in the break room, filling her water bottle when the building shook. A massive boom echoed from the main gym floor. She dropped the bottle and ran. Declan was already there. A skylight in the main weight room had shattered, sending tempered glass and gallons of rainwater cascading onto the squat racks. "Clear the floor!" Declan bellowed over the noise of the storm. His voice was command-level loud, cutting through the panic. "Everyone to the basement level, now!" The pack members moved instantly, obeying the alpha. Caleb grabbed a towel and started herding people toward the stairs. Declan spotted Cleo. He marched over to her, grabbing her arm. "I told you to stay in the executive wing." "I heard the crash," Cleo yelled back. "Is anyone hurt?" "Just property," Declan grimaced, looking at the water pooling on the expensive rubber flooring. "But the grid is down. Cell towers are likely out too. We're stuck here until this passes." They retreated to the executive conference room, which was windowless and reinforced. The storm raged outside, vibrating the walls. It felt like they were in a submarine at the bottom of a violent ocean. "So much for my performance review," Cleo joked weakly, trying to lighten the mood. She sat on the edge of his desk. Declan didn't smile. He was pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. "No signal. Landline is dead." "Who are you trying to call?" "The perimeter patrols," Declan said. "I have 2 pups, teenagers, doing a perimeter check on the ridge. They were supposed to check in an hour ago." Cleo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft. "The ridge? Where the mudslides happen?" Declan nodded, his jaw tight. "If they're up there..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Chapter 20. The Call. An hour passed. The storm intensified. Declan was a statue by the window, watching the rain lash the city. Cleo was sitting on the sofa, organizing her medical kit, just in case. Then, a crackle of static broke the silence. It came from a handheld radio on Declan's desk. "Alpha Rourke, do you copy?" Declan lunged for the radio. "This is Rourke, report." It's Liam!" The voice was young, terrified, and breaking up. "We're trapped. Mudslide. Northridge. Jacob is hurt. Leg is bad. Bone is..." The signal cut out in a hiss of white noise. "Liam!" Declan roared into the radio. "Liam, give me your coordinates!" Static. Declan crushed the radio in his grip, tossing the plastic shards onto the desk. "They're buried. Or trapped." He moved instantly, grabbing his tactical jacket from the coat rack. "I have to go." "I'm coming with you," Cleo said, standing up. She grabbed her heavy trauma bag. "No." Declan turned on her, his eyes flashing gold. "Absolutely not. It's a slide zone. It's unstable. You are human." "Jacob has a broken leg," Cleo shot back, marching up to him. "You heard him. Bone is..." "That means compound fracture. If you try to move him without stabilizing it, you could sever an artery. He'll bleed out before you get him down." I can carry him, Declan argued. Carrying him isn't the problem. Keeping him alive is. Cleo grabbed the lapels of his jacket, forcing him to look at her. You are strong, Declan. You can lift a car, but you can't set a bone in the dark in the rain. I can. She shook him once. I am the pack healer. Let me do my job. Declan stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the competence, the refusal to back down. He looked at the window, then back at her. The Bronco, he said. My SUV is built for the track, not the trenches. It'll bottom out in 2 feet of slush. The Bronco has the lift kit. It's parked out back, Cleo said, already moving toward the door. I replaced the spark plugs yesterday. She'll run. Cleo. I know how to drive my own truck, Rourke. Get in. Chapter 21. The Ascent. The 1990 Ford Bronco groaned like a dying beast as Cleo slammed it into low gear. Ease off the throttle, Declan barked from the passenger seat. He was gripping the dashboard handle, the "Oh Jesus" bar, ignoring the freezing water dripping onto his shoulder from the leaking door seal he had warned her about. If I ease off, we sink, Cleo yelled back over the roar of the engine and the deafening drumbeat of rain on the metal roof. This mud is like quicksand. Momentum is the only thing keeping us moving. She wrestled the steering wheel to the left, correcting a skid that threatened to send them careening into a ditch. The Bronco's oversized tires, usually a source of ridicule for her fuel economy, were now the only thing clawing for purchase in the viscous slurry of the logging road. Outside, the world had been reduced to a blur of gray and black. The headlights cut through the deluge, illuminating falling branches and cascading water. The wind buffeted the heavy truck, trying to shove it off the mountain. Turn right at the fork, Declan commanded, his eyes scanning the dark woods with supernatural intensity. That's not a road, that's a goat path, Cleo argued, though she spun the wheel anyway. It cuts 2 miles off the ascent. They are at the North Ridge. We need speed. The Bronco lurched onto the narrower path. Branches whipped against the side panels, screeching like banshees. The incline steepened. The engine whined, the temperature gauge creeping toward the red. Come on, you old girl, Cleo whispered, patting the dashboard. Don't die on me now. I'll buy you premium oil, I promise. Suddenly, the headlights illuminated a wall of debris. A massive Douglas fir had come down, blocking the path entirely. Cleo slammed on the brakes. The truck slid sideways, mud spraying in heavy arcs, before coming to a halt 10 feet from the fallen giant. End of the line, Cleo panted, killing the engine. The silence inside the cab was deafening for a second, before the storm's roar swallowed them again. Declan was already unbuckling. We hike from here. It's a mile up, vertical. He looked at her, his expression grim. Stay close to me. If you slip, I catch you. If I say run, you run. Do not argue. Do not debate. Understood? Cleo popped the glove box, grabbed a red emergency flare, and shoved it into her pocket. She grabbed her heavy trauma bag from the back seat, slinging it over her shoulder. She met his amber gaze, seeing the raw fear he was suppressing. Fear for the boys, fear for her. I follow your lead, Alpha, she said, using his title seriously for the first time. Let's go get your pups. They stepped out into the chaotic night. The wind hit Cleo like a physical punch, nearly knocking her over. Declan was there instantly, his hand clamping onto the back of her jacket, anchoring her against the gale. They began the climb. Chapter 22. The Mudslide. The hike was less of a hike and more of a battle against gravity. The ground was a treacherous soup of mud, loose shale, and flowing water. Every step was a gamble. Cleo slipped twice in the first 10 minutes. Both times, Declan hauled her upright by her harness before her knees could hit the ground, his strength unfaltering even as the rain plastered his hair to his skull. They didn't speak. They couldn't. The wind tore words away before they could be spoken. Declan stopped abruptly. He tilted his head, closing his eyes against the rain. He was hunting. Not with his eyes, but with senses Cleo couldn't comprehend. He inhaled deeply, tasting the air. He pointed northeast, toward a jagged outcropping of rock. "There!" he shouted. They scrambled over a ridge. The beam of Declan's tactical flashlight cut through the darkness, landing on a scene of devastation. The side of the mountain had sheared away. A river of mud and boulders had wiped out the trail. Huddled on a narrow ledge that was rapidly eroding were two figures. "Liam! Jacob!" Declan roared, his voice booming like thunder. "Alpha!" A terrified voice cracked back. Liam, a lanky teenager of maybe 17, was waving frantically. Beside him, Jacob was lying in the mud, his face pale as death, clutching his left leg. Declan didn't hesitate. He slid down the embankment, his boots digging deep furrows into the earth. Cleo followed, sliding on her backside, clutching her medical bag to her chest. They reached the ledge. Liam was shivering violently, wet and in shock. Jacob was worse. He was drifting in and out of consciousness. "Report!" Declan demanded, kneeling beside Jacob. He placed a hand on the boy's forehead, checking his temperature. The ground just gave way," Liam stammered, teeth chattering. "A rock crushed his leg. He screamed for a minute, then he just stopped." Cleo shoved past Declan. "Move, let me see." She shone her headlamp on Jacob's leg. She hissed through her teeth. It was a compound fracture of the tibia. The bone had punctured the skin, and the dark blood was mixing with the mud. Is he gonna die?" Liam asked, his voice small. "Not on my watch," Cleo said fiercely. She looked at Declan. "I need to stabilize this before we move him. If that bone shifts while you carry him, it could sever the popliteal artery. If that happens, he bleeds out in 4 minutes." "Do it," Declan said. He moved to Jacob's head, gripping the boy's shoulders. "I'll hold him. He won't thrash." Cleo opened her bag. Rain dripped onto her sterile gauze. This was battlefield medicine in the worst possible conditions. Chapter 23. The Field Medicine. "Jacob!" Cleo said loudly, leaning close to the boy's face. "Jacob, can you hear me?" Jacob's eyelids fluttered. "Hurts," he whimpered. "I know," Cleo said, her voice steady and commanding. "I'm going to fix it, but it's going to hurt a hell of a lot more for about 10 seconds. I need you to be brave." She looked at Declan. "I have to realign it to splint it. Hold him down. Do not let him kick." Declan nodded. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were filled with pain. Hurting his own pack went against every instinct he had, but saving them was the priority. He leaned down, whispering something in Jacob's ear, Gaelic maybe, or something older. "Ready," Declan said. Cleo grabbed the ankle and the calf. She took a breath. 1, 2, 3. She pulled traction. Jacob screamed. It was a raw, animalistic sound that merged with the howling wind. His body arched off the mud, muscles seizing. Declan held him flat, using his immense weight to pin the boy without crushing him. "Easy, pup, easy. It's done." Cleo worked fast. She packed the wound with sterile dressing, wrapped it tight to stop the bleeding, and used 2 collapsible SAM splints from her bag to immobilize the leg. She secured it all with waterproof tape. "Pulse check," she muttered to herself, pressing her fingers to the top of his foot. Thump, thump. "Good pulse. Circulation is intact." She sat back on her heels, wiping rain and mud from her eyes. "He's stable, but we need to go. Now! Shock is setting in." Declan scooped Jacob up into his arms, as if the boy weighed nothing. Jacob passed out from the pain, his head lolling against Declan's chest. "Liam," Declan barked, "take Cleo's bag. Stay in front of me. Cleo, you're behind me. Watch our 6. "Moving," Cleo said, helping Liam stand. The descent was a nightmare. The mudslide had made the terrain unstable. Every step was a calculation. Declan moved with burden. His center of gravity shifted by the unconscious boy in his arms, but he didn't stumble. They were halfway down the slope when Cleo heard it. A huff, a snap of a branch. It wasn't the wind. She shined her flashlight into the tree line to their right. 2 eyes reflected back. Not the gold of a wolf, the primal, hungry brown of an apex predator. It was a grizzly, gaunt and wet, likely flushed out of its den by the storm and desperate. It stood on its hind legs, sniffing the air. It smelled blood. Jacob's blood. "Declan," Cleo whispered, her voice trembling. 3 o'clock. Chapter 24. The Bear. Declan stopped. He turned his head slowly. A low growl started in his chest, vibrating through Jacob's unconscious body. The bear dropped to all fours and roared. It was a terrifying, guttural sound that made the ground shake. "Liam, get behind me," Declan ordered. "Cleo, take the boy." "I can't carry him," Cleo shouted. "He weighs 200 pounds." "Take him," Declan roared. He made to put Jacob down, to shift into his wolf form to fight. "No!" Cleo realized the problem instantly. If Declan shifted, he would drop Jacob in the mud. The transformation took seconds they didn't have. And fighting a bear on a mudslide while protecting 2 humans? It was suicide. "Don't put him down!" Cleo yelled. She stepped in front of Declan, shielding him. "Cleo, get back!" Declan shouted, his eyes flashing gold. "Shut up!" Cleo reached into her pocket. She grabbed the emergency road flare she had shoved in there before leaving the truck. She ripped the cap off and struck it. Hiss! The flare ignited with a blinding crimson light, spewing sparks and red smoke into the rain. The bear recoiled, confused by the sudden brilliance. "Hey!" Cleo screamed, waving the flare like a madwoman. "Hey, Yogi! Over here!" She reached into her other pocket with her free hand. Her fingers closed around a plastic bag. Pickles trail mix. Premium walnuts, dried mango, and pumpkin seeds. She had thrown it in her pocket that morning before leaving the bungalow, intending to eat it for lunch. She ripped the bag open with her teeth. "You want a snack?" she yelled at the bear. "Eat this!" She threw the handful of nuts and fruit as hard as she could, aiming not at the bear, but at the rocks 20 feet to the left, away from their path. The bear paused. The scent of high-fat walnuts and sweet mango cut through the metallic smell of blood. It was hungry. It was confused by the fire, and suddenly there was food that didn't fight back over there. The massive animal huffed, looked at the flare, then looked at the scattered nuts. It turned its humped back to them, lumbering toward the food. "Go!" Cleo screamed, backing away, keeping the flare between them and the animal. "Move! Now!" Declan didn't argue. He surged forward, pushing Liam ahead of him. Cleo brought up the rear, walking backward, the red light casting her shadow long and monstrous against the trees. They scrambled down the last 100 yards of the incline, slipping and sliding, until they hit the flat logging road where the Bronco waited. Cleo tossed the dying flare into the mud behind them and sprinted for the driver's side. "In! Everyone in!" She threw herself behind the wheel as Declan bundled Jacob and Liam into the back seat. He dove into the passenger seat just as a dark shape emerged from the woods behind them. Cleo slammed the Bronco into gear and floored it. The tires spun, caught, and launched them forward, leaving the bear and the mountain behind in a spray of gravel. Chapter 25. The Cabin. They couldn't make it back to the city. The storm had washed out the lower road. "Pull in there," Declan directed, pointing to a gravel track blocked by a chain. "It's an old ranger station, Pack property. It has a wood stove." Cleo smashed the Bronco through the rusted chain without hesitation. She parked in front of a small, sturdy log cabin. They evacuated into the shelter. Declan kicked the door open, carrying Jacob inside. Liam followed, shivering uncontrollably. Cleo brought the medical bag. The cabin was freezing, dusty, and smelled of pine, but it was dry. "Liam, check the wood bin," Declan ordered, laying Jacob on the single, dusty cot in the corner. "There should be a tin of waterproof matches on the mantel. Get a fire going. Now!" Cleo immediately checked Jacob's vitals. "Pulse is steady. The splint held. He's waking up." Declan stepped back, leaning against the wall. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. The adrenaline was crashing. Cleo finished checking Jacob, then turned to Declan. She walked over and stood in front of him. He looked up. He was covered in mud. His expensive tactical jacket was ruined. He looked exhausted. "You," he breathed, staring at her. "You threw nuts at a bear." "They were premium organic walnuts," Cleo said, her voice shaking now that the danger was over. "Pickles is going to be furious I wasted them." Declan started to laugh. It was a breathless, jagged sound. He reached out and grabbed her hand, pulling her down until she was kneeling between his legs. "You stood in front of me," he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "You protected the alpha." "I protected the patient," she corrected, though she didn't pull her hand away. "If you had fought that bear, you would have dropped Jacob." "You are insane," Declan said, lifting a hand to cup her face. His thumb wiped a smudge of mud from her cheek. "And you are the bravest human I have ever met." The air in the cabin shifted. The cold retreated, replaced by the heat radiating between them. Liam was busy at the fireplace, his back to them. Jacob was groaning softly on the cot. But for a moment, it was just the two of them. "We need to get out of these wet clothes," Cleo said, her voice husky. "Hypothermia risk." "Medical necessity?" Declan asked, a ghost of a smirk touching his lips. "Strictly medical," she whispered. Declan leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "Thank you, Cleo, for saving my pack, for saving me." "Don't thank me yet," she murmured, closing her eyes. "We're stuck in a one-room cabin with 2 teenagers and no coffee. The real survival test starts now." Chapter 26. The Surrender. The silence in the cabin was broken only by the crackle of the wood stove and the rhythmic, wheezing breaths of the sleeping teenagers. Liam had passed out on the rug in front of the hearth, exhausted by shock. Jacob was stable on the cot, heavily sedated by the pain meds in Cleo's kit. That left the 2 adults awake in the semi-darkness. Cleo sat on the floor, her back against the rough logs of the wall, shivering despite the fire. Her clothes were drying on a makeshift line, leaving her wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket she'd found in a chest. Declan sat opposite her. He had stripped off his ruined shirt, his torso bare and gilded by the firelight. There were faint, silvery scars on his ribs, marks from silver weapons that refused to fade like normal wounds. They told stories of violence she didn't know yet. He looked like a man who had been pushed to his limit. "Stop shivering," Declan commanded softly. "I'm trying," Cleo's teeth chattered. "Adrenaline crash. It messes with thermal regulation." Declan moved. He didn't ask. He crawled across the space between them and settled beside her, pulling her against his side. His body was a furnace. The heat radiating from him was immediate and overwhelming, soaking into her cold skin. "Better?" he asked, his arm heavy and possessive around her shoulders. "Medically speaking? Yes," Cleo whispered, leaning her head against his bare shoulder. She traced the line of a scar on his chest. "You were terrified up there." "I was," Declan admitted. He turned his head, his nose brushing her hair. "Not for myself. For them. For you. When that bear stood up, my heart stopped." "I had it handled," Cleo murmured, though the memory made her pulse spike. "You had a flare and a bag of nuts," Declan corrected, a low rumble starting in his chest. "You are reckless, Cleo Halloway." "I'm effective," she countered, tilting her head up to look at him. The movement brought their faces inches apart. The playful banter died in her throat. Declan's eyes were dark, dilated, searching hers with a raw intensity that stripped away her defenses. "You didn't run," he whispered. "You saw the wolf. You saw the danger. And you stood in front of me." "I told you," Cleo said, her voice trembling for a different reason now. "I protect my patients. And I protect my team." "Is that all I am?" Declan asked, his hand coming up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her bottom lip. "Your team?" Cleo's breath hitched. The walls she had built, the professionalism, the skepticism, the fear, crumbled. She was tired of fighting the gravity that pulled her toward him. "No," she breathed. "You're the alpha, and you're mine." Declan groaned, a sound of pure defeat, and crashed his mouth onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It was the storm outside brought indoors. Cleo's hands tangled in his dark hair, pulling him closer, needing the friction, the weight, the heat of him. He shifted, pulling her onto his lap, wrapping the blanket around them both like a cocoon. "I tried to stay away," he murmured against her throat, his lips trailing fire down her neck. "I tried to be professional." "You failed," Cleo gasped, arching into his touch. "Thank God," he growled. There, on the floor of a dusty cabin, with the storm raging outside and his pack safe beside them, Cleo finally stopped analyzing and started feeling. She surrendered not to his command, but to his care. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel lonely. She felt anchored. Chapter 27. The Morning After. Cleo woke up to the smell of wood smoke and… wet dog? No, not wet dog. Musk. She blinked her eyes open. She was warm, incredibly warm. She was trapped under a heavy weight. She shifted and realized the weight was an arm. Declan's arm. They were tangled together on the floor under the wool blankets. His face was buried in the crook of her neck, his breathing deep and slow. She froze. Oh God, the teenagers. She lifted her head carefully. Liam was sitting up by the window, staring outside. Jacob was still asleep on the cot. Liam turned. He saw Cleo staring at him. He saw Declan's arm draped possessively over her. The kid grinned, a wide, knowing teenage grin. Cleo flushed scarlet. She poked Declan in the ribs, hard. "Wake up," she hissed. "We have an audience." Declan grunted, tightening his grip reflexively before waking up. He blinked, saw Liam, and sat up instantly, shifting into alpha mode so fast it gave her whiplash. "Report," Declan barked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Rain stopped, Alpha," Liam said, trying unsuccessfully to hide his smirk. "Road looks like mud soup, but I hear trucks, big ones." Declan stood up, stretching. His back cracked audibly. He offered a hand to Cleo, pulling her up. "The pack," he said. "They're coming for us." 10 minutes later, the sound of heavy diesel engines filled the clearing. 3 massive, lifted trucks, IronClad company vehicles, smashed through the brush and pulled up to the cabin. Caleb jumped out of the lead truck, followed by 4 other large men. They rushed the cabin. "Alpha!" Caleb yelled, bursting through the door. "We lost signal! We thought…" He stopped. He looked at Jacob on the cot. He looked at Cleo, who was disheveled, wearing muddy clothes, standing next to Declan. Declan stepped forward. "Jacob has a compound tib-fib fracture. Cleo stabilized it. He needs transport to the private clinic. Careful with the leg." The men moved instantly, lifting Jacob with gentle, reverent hands. Caleb looked at Cleo. He sniffed the air. His eyes widened. He smelled Declan on her. The scent of the alpha was all over her. Smoke, cedar, and the claim of the night before. Caleb didn't make a joke. He didn't ask about her parrot. He lowered his head, exposing his neck slightly, a gesture of submission. "Good work, Luna," he whispered. Cleo stiffened. "Don't call me that, Caleb. I just did my job." Declan placed a hand on the small of her back. "Let's go home, Cleo. You need a shower. And coffee." "And a lawyer," she muttered, looking at the wrecked cabin. "We definitely broke into federal property." Chapter 28. The Return. Returning to IronClad Wellness was different. The power was back on. The glass in the main gym was being swept up, but the atmosphere had shifted. When Cleo walked in, flanking Declan, the gym went silent. Usually, there was the clang of weights, the sound of treadmills, the chatter of athletes. Now, silence. Every eye turned to them. Cleo felt self-conscious. She was wearing Declan's oversized spare hoodie because her jacket was ruined. She looked like a drowned rat. "Why are they staring?" she whispered to Declan. "Do I have mud on my face?" "No," Declan said softly, guiding her toward the executive wing. "They know." "Know what? That we slept on a floor?" "That you saved the pups," Declan said. "News travels fast in a pack. You went up the mountain when the storm was at its peak. You faced a bear to save the future of the pack. To them, that isn't just a medical procedure, it's an act of leadership." As they passed the weight area, a group of massive men stopped lifting. They turned to Cleo. In unison, they nodded, a sharp, respectful dip of the chin. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Cleo felt a lump in her throat. She had spent her whole life fighting to be taken seriously in her field, to be respected for her brain and her hands. She never expected to find that respect in a gym full of werewolves. They reached the office. Declan closed the door, shutting out the stairs. "I need to go home," Cleo said, leaning against the desk. "I need to check on Pickles. I need to sleep for a week." "I'll drive you," Declan said. "But first—" He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a flat, rectangular velvet box. Cleo panicked. "Whoa, Rourke, we had one night in a cabin. If that is jewelry, I am going to hit you with a stapler. Too fast." Declan laughed. "It's not a ring, it's a key." He tossed it to her. It was a heavy iron key on a leather fob. "To the gym?" she asked. "To the private elevator," he said, "and the penthouse, in case you ever want to avoid the rain." Cleo curled her fingers around the warm metal. It was a gesture far more intimate than jewelry. It was access. It was trust. "I'll keep it on my keychain," she said softly, "right next to the wrench." Chapter 29. The Luna Title. The next day, Cleo arrived at work determined to return to normalcy. She failed immediately. On her desk was a basket of muffins, expensive ones. Attached was a card. "Thank you for saving my brother, Liam's family." Next to the muffins was a bottle of wine, "For the bear slayer," and a bag of organic walnuts, "For the bird." "Okay," Cleo said to the empty room. "This is getting weird." She went to the break room for coffee. 2 female pack members were there. They immediately stopped talking and moved aside to give her the best spot by the coffee machine. "Morning, Luna," one of them murmured. Cleo spun around. "Okay, stop! Time out!" The women froze. "My name is Cleo," she said firmly. "I am a physiotherapist. I fix knees. I crack backs. I am not a queen. I am not a Luna. I am the person who yells at you when you skip leg day. Do we understand each other?" The women looked at each other, then smiled. "Yes, Cleo," one said. "But you're the alpha's mate, and you save the bloodline. You can call yourself a physio, but the pack knows what you are." Cleo groaned and grabbed her coffee. She marched straight to Declan's office. "You need to send a memo," she announced, storming in. Declan looked up from his computer. He looked rested, powerful, and infuriatingly calm. "Good morning to you too. What's the memo?" "Tell them to stop calling me Luna," she said, pacing the room. "I don't want the politics, Declan. I don't want the bowing. I just want to do my job." Declan stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against the front of it, crossing his arms. "You think Luna means sitting on a throne?" he asked. "Doesn't it?" "No," Declan said. "A Luna isn't a trophy. She's the spine. The alpha is the teeth, the muscle. The Luna is the stability, the care, the one who keeps the monster in check." He reached out, taking her hand. "You were doing the job before you even knew the title, Cleo. You faced me down in the locker room. You challenged my logic. You saved my boys. You aren't Luna because I'm sleeping with you. You're Luna because you're the only one strong enough to handle us." Cleo stared at him. It was the most romantic, terrifying thing anyone had ever said to her. "I'm keeping my last name," she whispered weakly. "Negotiable," Declan smirked. "For now." Chapter 30. The Final Test. Peace, however, was short-lived. At 2 p.m., the gym doors slammed open. Sienna marched in. She wasn't alone. She had 2 hulking enforcers flanking her, her brothers, in human form, looking uncomfortable to be dragged into this. She looked furious. She walked straight to the center of the gym floor, where Cleo was helping a client with deadlifts. "Rourke!" Sienna screamed. "Declan Rourke! Show yourself!" Declan appeared on the mezzanine. He looked bored. "Sienna, I thought I banned you." "You chose a human!" Sienna pointed a manicured finger at Cleo. "You rejected our alliance, rejected me, for this fragile, breakable thing? It is an insult to my bloodline." The gym went silent. The pack watched. This was a challenge. "She is not fragile," Declan said, his voice hardening. "Leave, Sienna, before I make you." "She cannot protect the pack," Sienna yelled. "If a rival attacks, what will she do? Massage them to death? A Luna must be a warrior." Declan gripped the railing, ready to jump. But Cleo stepped forward. "Declan, stay there," she ordered. Her voice was calm, projecting clearly across the silent gym. Declan paused. He didn't jump. He waited. Cleo wiped her hands on a towel and turned to Sienna. She walked up to the towering blonde shifter. Sienna snarled, flashing fangs. "You think strength is teeth?" Cleo asked, her voice steady. "You think it's claws? That's easy. Anyone can break things. I fix them." "You are prey," Sienna spat. "I faced a bear on Northridge 2 nights ago," Cleo said, stepping closer until she was nose to nose with the wolf. "I didn't have claws. I didn't have muscle. I had a road flare and my brain. And I brought 2 pack members home alive. Where were you, Sienna? Were you filing your nails?" Sienna bristled. "I would have torn the bear apart." "And you would have dropped the injured boy in the mud to do it," Cleo countered brutally. "That's the difference between us. You want glory. I want survival. A pack doesn't need another killer. It has Declan. It needs someone who knows how to keep the killers alive." Cleo gestured to the room, to Caleb, to the men she treated daily. "Ask them," Cleo challenged. "Ask them if I'm weak." Sienna looked around. Caleb stepped forward, then another wolf, then another. They formed a wall behind Cleo, a silent, massive wall of muscle. "She healed me," Caleb said simply. "She's pack." Sienna stared at the wall of wolves defending the human. Her face crumbled. She had lost the room. She had lost the argument. Cleo stepped back, dismissing her. "Your posture is still terrible, Sienna. Anterior pelvic tilt. It screams insecurity. You should work on that." Sienna let out a frustrated shriek, turned on her heel, and stormed out, her brothers trailing behind her in embarrassment. Cleo let out a breath and looked up at the mezzanine. Declan was smiling. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated pride. "That," he called down, "was incredibly hot." Chapter 31. The new normal life at IronClad Wellness settled into a rhythm that was equal parts medical facility and wolf sanctuary. 3 months had passed since the storm, and Cleo Halloway had officially become the busiest woman in Portland. Her patient list was no longer just athletes. It was a roster of shifters from 3 neighboring territories who had heard about the human woman who could fix a torn ACL faster than they could regenerate it. Cleo stood in the center of the main gym floor, holding a stopwatch. "Caleb, keep your core tight," she yelled. "If I see that back arch one more time, you are doing burpees until you puke." Caleb, fully healed and currently deadlifting 400 pounds, groaned but corrected his form instantly. "Yes, Luna." "Don't call me Luna," Cleo shouted back, though the bite had gone out of her tone. It was a losing battle. To the pack, she was the Luna. She was the one who kept the alpha sane and the pups alive. They brought her coffee. They washed her Bronco, which was now running perfectly thanks to the pack mechanics. And they terrified anyone who looked at her sideways in the grocery store. Declan watched from the mezzanine. He did that a lot lately, just watching her run his gym better than he ever had. He walked down the stairs, the heavy thud of his boots making the younger wolves scramble out of the way. He came up behind Cleo, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're terrorizing them," he murmured into her ear, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "I'm engaging in preventative medicine," Cleo corrected, leaning back against his solid chest. "If they lift wrong, they get hurt. If they get hurt, I have to work late. If I work late, I can't go home and feed the parrot." "Ah, the parrot," Declan sighed, though his arms tightened possessively. "How is the little menace?" "Pickles is drunk on power," Cleo admitted. "Liam brought him a bag of macadamia nuts yesterday. Now he refuses to eat anything that isn't imported from Hawaii." Declan laughed, a deep rumble that vibrated against her back. "I'll talk to Liam. Stop spoiling the bird." "Good luck," Cleo smirked. "Liam is terrified of him. Pickles bit his finger and called him a beta cuck. I don't even know where he learned that." Declan buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent. "You need a break. Leave early today. Let's go to the coast." "I can't," Cleo said, checking her clipboard. "I have paperwork, and Sienna sent her brother for a consultation. Apparently, his hamstring healed short after a fight. He needs me to break up the scar tissue so he can walk straight." "Sienna's brother?" Declan pulled back, frowning. "You're treating the enemy?" "They aren't enemies, Declan. They're potential clients," Cleo said, tapping the clipboard with her pen. "Besides, I charge them double. It's the asshole tax. It's going into the Pickles retirement fund. I know you sneak him snacks, but I'm paying for his main course." Declan stared at her. He looked at the woman who had walked into his life with a dying truck and a bad attitude, and who was now effectively running the supernatural underworld of Portland with a clipboard and a glare. "God, I love you," he said. It wasn't the first time he'd said it, but it still made the gym go quiet. Caleb dropped his weights. Cleo turned in his arms, her cheeks flushing pink. She poked him in the chest. "You're distracting my patients, Rourke. Go lift something heavy and look pretty." "Yes, ma'am." Declan grinned, stealing a kiss before sauntering off to bench press a small car. Cleo watched him go, hiding her smile behind the clipboard. The locker room view had been nice, but this view, him happy, the pack safe, and her place in the center of it all, was definitely better. Chapter 32. Epilogue. 6 months later. The penthouse smelled of rain and expensive scotch. It was the top floor of the IronClad building, a space Cleo now officially shared with Declan. She still kept her bungalow, mostly because Pickles refused to move his entire toy collection, but tonight the bird was crashing with them. Cleo was sitting on the leather sofa, reviewing the blueprints for the clinic expansion. Declan wanted to knock down the east wall to build her a hydrotherapy suite. "It's too much," Cleo said without looking up. "We don't need a waterfall, Declan. It's a rehab center, not a resort." "Wolves like water," Declan's voice came from the balcony. He stepped inside, sliding the glass door shut against the night air. "And I like spoiling you." He walked over to the sofa. He looked nervous. Declan Rourke, the man who fought bears and intimidated senators, was fidgeting with his cufflinks. "Cleo, put the blueprints down." Cleo sensed the shift in the air. The alpha gravity. She set the papers aside and stood up. "What's wrong? Is it the pack? Is it Sienna again?" "No," Declan said. "It's us." He reached into his pocket. Cleo's heart stopped. "Oh no, he's going to do it. He's going to kneel." She wasn't a kneeling kind of girl. But Declan didn't kneel. He knew her too well. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of paper and a small velvet box. "I know you value independence," Declan started, his voice rough with emotion. "I know you hate feeling owned, so I'm not asking you to belong to me. I'm asking to belong to you." He handed her the paper first. Cleo unfolded it. It was a deed. A deed to the entire east wing of the building, the very same wing she had snuck into on her first day. "You bought me the wing?" she whispered. The one with the scaffolding? I finished the renovations, he corrected. For you. It's yours. Your clinic, your rules, independent of IronClad. You aren't my employee anymore, Cleo. You're my partner. Tears pricked her eyes. He had listened. He knew exactly what she needed, not diamonds, but autonomy. Then he opened the velvet box. It wasn't a delicate gem. It was a band of hammered gold, inlaid with a strip of meteorite iron. It looked ancient, unbreakable, and beautiful. It matches the scar on your chin, he said softly. Imperfect, tough, and the only thing I want to look at for the rest of my life. Declan, she choked out. Marry me, Halloway, he said, stepping close, crowding her space in that way she loved. Let me be your headache forever. Cleo looked at the man who had terrified her, challenged her, and ultimately surrendered to her. You're already my headache, she said, snatching the ring from the box and sliding it onto her own finger. But I suppose I can keep you. Declan let out a breath that sounded like a cracked rib healing. He pulled her into a crushing hug, lifting her off her feet. I swear, I will never let you down. Put me down, you brute, she laughed, kicking her legs. He set her down on the edge of the sofa, but didn't let go. He loomed over her, eyes burning with gold fire. From the corner of the room, on his new deluxe perch by the window, Pickles woke up. He ruffled his feathers, looked at the ring, looked at Declan, and let out a wolf whistle. Finally! The bird screeched. Kiss her, you idiot! Declan groaned, resting his forehead against Cleo's. I hate that bird. He's family, Cleo reminded him, wrapping her arms around his neck. And he's right. Is he? Declan smirked, his hands sliding down to her waist. Shut up and kiss me, Rourke, she ordered. He obeyed. And as the rain lashed against the windows of their fortress, Cleo smiled against his lips. She had walked into the wrong door nearly a year ago, but she had definitely ended up in the right place. The view, she decided, was just a bonus. The end.